Hello everyone, my name is Morad BALI. I'm a PhD student in economics at the Grenoble University, France, and a PhD student in econometrics at the St. Petersburg State University of Economics, Russia. Today I'm going to speak about international economic sanctions and more specifically about the creation of a sanction index. So first of all, what is an economic sanction? The thing is that the very definition of economic sanction is a source of conflict within the literature. I have decided to keep two definitions. The first one from George et al. 1994, who is saying that sanctions are efforts to persuade an opponent to stop or reverse an action. The second one is the one of Hofbauer et al. 1990, who are saying that economic sanctions are the deliberate, government-inspired withdrawal or threat of withdrawal of customary trade or financial relations. They develop explaining that there are three main ways of imposing sanctions: limiting exports, restricting imports, or by impending finance, which includes the reduction of aid. So, knowing that economic sanctions are a very complex thing, a good question will be to know how to measure them. The first tool which have been used to study economic sanctions is a dummy variable. So basically you create a variable which has the value of 0 if there is no sanction and of 1 if there is a sanction. Very recently, Draeger et al. So 2016, but in fact their first working paper, if my memory is good, was in 2015, created a sanction index that they used within structural vector autoregression modeling. Basically, this is the aggregation of dummy variables through time. So, for example, when the European Union decides to implement their first sanctions, the index is going to take the value either of 1, 2, or 3, depending on who is sending it. They also had a weight, that is the share of the issuing country in the target's foreign trade. Finally, what is important to know is that their sanction index have been created for quarterly data. As it is, their sanction has several limitations. The first one is that the index is never decreasing. So it means that sanction effects are sustainable and invariable. The second limitation is the absence of sanction independency. Sanctions do not have an ID, they are not independent variables, so it means that you cannot, once they are in the sum, which is making the sanction index, the final sanction index, you are not able to modify them. Because of all these limitations, we have decided to create also a composite sanction index, which is also the aggregation of dummy variables through time, but where sanctions are independent and have an ID. It's useful to do this because it allows us to define parameters for each sanction. Finally, our index can be turned into a daily frequency, monthly frequency, quarterly, and so on, since we are implementing sanction day by day. The first parameter of our index is the alpha parameter, the sanction type. So basically this is the raw value of a sanction, and it depends whether it is a sanction against an individual, an official announcement of sanctions, a sanction against a company, against an economic sector, or the maximum an embargo. We perfectly know that these values are totally arbitrary, and this is, let's say, a first try and we would like to improve the way of calculating the value of the alpha parameter. But for now, to start, we had to decide something, and we have decided to use this ranking, which makes sense in our opinion. Then comes beta parameter, that is the economic leverage. So it's the ability of the sanction sender to apply economic pressure on its targets. It's composed of two sub-variables, A and B. So the first one, A, is the trade intensity between the sanction sender and its target. And the second one, B, is the weight of trade in the target's GDP. So basically, for a sanction to be efficient, it's important that the country that is sending the sanction has a strong trade relationship with its target, and it's also important that the trade of the target is representing a considerable share of its GDP. Finally, the last parameter is key, the time factor. It witnesses the effect of time on the economic pressure induced by sanction. K is the sanction sender, I is the sanction ID. T is defined depending on the series timeline. The series timeline, by this I mean the timeline of the model. U is representing an instance from, let's say, a different timeline than T, in the way that U is the moment when the sanction is introduced, and the moment when the sanction will be over, so represented by U in capital letter. O defines the slope of key, and the lower O is going to be, the more horizontal the slope will be, and then the lesser the time factor will negatively impact the sanction's ability to apply economic pressure. Reversely, the higher O is, and the less horizontal the slope is going to be, and the more the time factor will be able to negatively impact the sanction's ability to apply economic pressure. So the final equation of our sanction index is as it is here. As you can see, we have alpha, beta, and key parameters. They are attached, of course, to each sanctions that we will implement in our case study. Regarding the graphical representation, you can see here on the left the new sanction index, and on the right the previous sanction index. Now we have decided to create a small simulation, an empirical analysis based on a structural vector autoregressive model. So for those who are not familiar with this type of model, what is important to know is that it was introduced by Sims in 1980, that it estimates a series of equations containing variables which contemporaneously impact each other or with lags. And this type of model is very useful because it allows us to isolate effects, or let's say variations due to changes of one variable on others. Regarding our data, it starts in January 2010 and it ends in July 2018. All variables are stationary. We have, of course, the new sanction index, the previous sanction index, the ruble real effective exchange rate from the IMF, Brent oil prices from Intercontinental Exchange, and the Russian industrial price index from Rostat, which will be used as a proxy of the Russian GDP. According to the Cholesky ordering, our vector of endogenous variables is defined as in model A or as in model B. The causal ordering follows the same logic. That is that sanctions are able to affect the real effective exchange rate, Brent oil prices, and Russian GDP. So real effective exchange rate and Brent oil prices are control variable, and the Russian GDP proxied by industrial price index is our variable of interest. Our causal variable, of course, is the sanction index. Our results show that the new sanction index enhances model's explanatory power. For example, a sanction shock in model A, so with the new sanction index, has more than 5% of explanatory power, while a similar shock, but this time with the previous sanction index, has less than 1% of explanatory power. Another interesting fact is that the new sanction index provides a better impulse response function. So you can see it with this comparison. On the left side, the new sanction index, and on the right side, the previous sanction index. As you can see, what is quite important is the 95% confidence interval. And as you can see on the right side with the previous sanction index, this confidence interval is quite large, while on the left side it's slightly improved and gets better. This is important because the confidence interval is witnessing the statistical significance of our model. In order to check our results, we have decided to create an extended structural vector autoregression model. The model logic is similar to models A and B, except that we add two additional variables. The first one is capital flows balance from the Bank of International Settlements, and the second one is Russian exports from Rostat. Results regarding the FEVD, which is, by the way, I didn't say earlier, sorry, the forecast error variance decomposition. So these results are similar to model A and B. Regarding the IRF, the impulse response functions, results are more or less the same. That is that we are able to slightly reduce the scope of the confidence interval. In conclusion, I would like to say that references, of course, are available at the end of this presentation. Thank you very much to Nadi Rapelanoro, who is my co-author. He's the one who have been leading most structural vector autoregression models that we tried in order to create this sanction index. Unfortunately, he was not able to be present today, but thank you to him. If you're interested somehow by sanctions in a general way, I have written a quite long literature review on this topic, and I will be glad to share it. And if you are interested in using this sanction index, don't hesitate to contact me, as much as if you want to participate to his construction. We truly believe that this sanction is not entirely ready yet, in the way that we can still improve it. So if you're interested in it, you are more than welcome. Thank you very much for your attention.